So thank you all for coming for the afternoon policy discussion today. This is something we started last year at the Southern Governors Association, sort of as part of the merger of activities between the Southern Growth Policy Board and the Southern Governors. And this is the afternoon before the governors all come in and get settled, where we try to think a little bit. And so today, you're actually part of a higher education forum that's part of the National Issues Forum, sponsored by the Kettering Foundation. It's something that myself and one or two other people have been doing across the country for the last year. We've been talking to groups about the role of higher education. What is it that you expect higher ed to be doing? We've talked to little bitty groups in the North Carolina mountains of about 10 people. We've talked to groups of about 300 in Kentucky, where everybody was talking about this and fighting about it. We've had great discussions, and I can honestly tell you that there's no consensus, but that's a good thing. There's a good thing that people are talking about it. There are a little over 4,600 colleges and universities in the United States, and about every one of them is thinking about reinvention. They're not all doing it, but they're thinking about it. We're going to spend about 90 minutes today listening to you. For the few of you who I saw this morning at another event, I'm not presenting this afternoon, I'm facilitating you talking. We're going to try to have a conversation about those things that are changing in the world that are impacting higher ed and what you value for higher education as it moves forward. You know, we're in a world that's changing pretty rapidly. You know, the bars are changing for what people expect from their higher education, the return on investment. I mean, people didn't talk return on investment till recently. We used to have, I was the first class back in the 70s where there were more women than men at the University of North Carolina. And today, 60% of the grads for the BAs are women. The jobs have changed dramatically. What people expect from them have changed. Education costs have changed. Our feeling about our economic competitiveness in the world has changed. And so we're looking to higher education for answers and for help. And when Kettering started this National Issues Forum discussion, they started talking about three areas for higher education. One is promoting global competitiveness. How does higher education help America win the battle for jobs and investment? And you know, what's their role there? The second issue was, you know, how does higher education make people better citizens? How does it broaden your vision, help you have softer skills, make you a more worldly person? Is that its role? Is it a worker training? Is it a broadening? And then the third issue that everybody talked about is, well, who gets to do this? Shouldn't everybody? I mean, you know, shouldn't education be absolutely free for everybody to just get whatever they want whenever they want? And of course, we know that's not the case. So this becomes a conversation of people and values. And what I would just urge you to do today is tell us your opinion. Ask us your questions. You know, we probably don't all know all the things we're supposed to on this. Be respectful of everybody else. And we're doing this today, we're getting taped, you know. The process doesn't look a lot like a Southern Governors Association meeting because there's not a bunch of governors sitting up here, and you're allowed to talk in this part. But we can see we have all the technology. Diane's over here typing feverishly of anybody who says anything that's interesting, and you note she hasn't written anything yet, so far I'm doing okay, I guess. So we're going to capture this. We won't attribute, because we're not going to tell you that you said this, but you know, it's a tape, and so someone could hear what you say. But we're going to try to capture some of this. We'll provide it to everybody who's been part of this. When you talk today, the only difference from our normal things is when you talk today, I want you to raise your hand, because Jennifer and Charlotte are running around with microphones. So we're going to ask you to stand up to ask your question or make your comment, and just tell us who you are, where you're from. And that way, we've got all these guys running around with cameras who are going to try to get you on camera real quick. So, you know, cough your hair a little bit before you stand up, and then and do that. But we need you to talk into a microphone. So I want to start really simply by going around the room. Higher education, by the way, in this conversation is all higher education. It's everything past 12. And that might be a certificate, that might be a 2-year, that might be a 4-year, that might be a graduate school. It's everything sort of higher, if you will. And I want you to just tell us who you are in the room. We're going to do this one time. You can see the number of people. So this is the 10-second version of who you are, what you do, and one thing that you think is impacting higher ed. It could be a word, it can be a sentence. Okay, that makes sense? One thing impacting higher ed today. And you don't want me to start with you, Beth, right? I got the evil eye over here. We might want, because you want to start over here, and we'll bring you a microphone. I know you know more about higher ed than just about anybody else on the planet. Name, serial number, and one thing that's impacting higher education that you think is important. The last time we were on a stage together, I was doing a trends thing. We were down in, I think it was Orlando, national conference, and he was releasing the new blueprint for what community colleges were going to be doing in the future. I want you to know that I do strategic planning for community colleges. Every one of them pulls out that blueprint as part of the process. So you made a difference. So
that's encouraging. It was great.
You got to stand up too. Yep. They want your picture on TV, so you know.
That's sort of sad, but good afternoon, everyone. I'm Walter Bumpus, President and CEO of the American Association of Community Colleges located in Washington, D.C. I would perhaps say that the one thing I find overriding in terms of impacting, whether it's 2-year or 4-year, is really the economy and trying to return people to the middle class.
Great. We're going to run all the way down here. Yeah, I know. Everybody gets to play today. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Moon. I'm a certified economic developer and director of economic development for Gulf Engineers and Consultants in Jackson, Mississippi. As an economic developer, I think the biggest challenge that we have and the need that we have to partner with institutions of higher learning is workforce development.
Jay, I know you got to talk later, so don't give away the good stuff. Just, you know.
Okay. My name is Jay Moon. I'm the president and CEO of the Mississippi Manufacturers Association. I'm also the chair of Mississippi's State Workforce Investment Board and the State Longitudinal Data System. I think one of the bigger issues that's impacting higher ed is the dropout rate in the country. If we don't get people through the 12th grade, we can't get them into higher education.
I'm Jerry Adams, President and CEO of the Arkansas Research Alliance, and I think the atrophy of state appropriations is a big issue for higher ed.
Good afternoon, I'm Mike Cassidy. I'm the Georgia Research Alliance. We have all the research alliances lined up here, I hope. We're a consortium of research universities in the state of Georgia. I'll just use the word alignment. It could be economic alignment, it could be workforce alignment, a lot of different things under that word.
Are y'all checking under the cushions to see if there's any loose change for the, no, okay, all right.
I'm Marsha Qualwasser. I'm with Northrop Grumman Corporation from California. Spend a lot of time in this part of the universe. Two things. I think real-world experience. A lot of people, unlike myself, who was given a 4-year National Science Foundation, I had no choice but to go on to higher education. I think there's a premium now on taking a break, and I don't know how many people then get back into higher education.
Right.
I'm Randy Mastinelli, University of Arkansas in government relations, and I'm going to magpie what they said, especially Jerry, funding on the state and federal level.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Melissa Rust. I'm with the University of Arkansas System. In talking to some of our campuses, the one thing that we hear over and over is cuts to federal aid, or financial aid on the federal level, that's had a real impact on enrollment the last couple of years, but both our 2- and 4-year institutions.
Okay.
Johnny Key with the University of Arkansas System, and up until 2 weeks ago was in the Arkansas Senate. And hi, Dr. Elliott. And one of the main things that I see as a difference is the difficulty in convincing legislators and helping them understand that spending for higher education is not the same as spending in state agencies. That there is a difference, and many times legislators don't understand that difference.
And just go ahead and warn you, I'm going to come back to you when we get in the Q&A and ask you what the difference is. Just going to tell you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Hogan. I'm president at National Park Community College. And I think that dropout rate in high school and state funding are two of the most pressing things.
Good afternoon. I'm Gordon Watts. I'm the Chief Academic Officer at National Park Community College. And I think one of the issues is our continuous work still, after all these years, trying to fix developmental education.
I'm Melanie Ritter from National Park Community College, and I think we have seen an increase in the expectation of transparency and accountability without any support for that.
Good afternoon. I'm Jackie Elliott. I'm president of North Arkansas College. I think one of our challenges is a societal belief that only a four-year degree has any value in the workforce.
You think we have a belief that it does or doesn't? What'd you say?
That only a four-year
Only a four. Okay. Thank you.
I'm Steve Hildebrand, Southeast Arkansas College. I got a list here.
Go for it.
If you really,
10 seconds.
I'm going to read to make sure I don't miss
as many as you can
anything.
get. 10 seconds. Go.
You know, of course, the economy is a problem. Other things too is just the flexible income or spendable income that middle class folks have in the for the two-year college system for sure. Financial aid is a problem with the changes the federal government has made over the last few years. In the year-round Pell, it adversely and disproportionately hurts the two-year colleges who don't go full time. And of course, workforce. You know, with the graying of America, and as me as a baby boomer, we start retiring, trying to help replace those. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Ellaby. I'm president of Pulaski Technical College in North Little Rock. We have 7 campuses here in the metro. I think one of the challenges that we have across this country in Arkansas is certainly the educational alignment between the systems, K-12 and higher ed.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike DeLong. I'm the provost at Pulaski Technical College, and one of the challenges I see is the readiness of students coming out of the K-12 system.
Lewis Shepard, Vice President for Student and External Affairs, Henderson State University in Arkadelphia. And I would echo what everyone else has said, and I think one of the key challenges is state funding and helping families who are really struggling to find a way to put their children through school.
I'm Elaine Kneebone. I'm the General Counsel at Henderson State University. I think the diminished state funding is an issue, coupled with the fact that higher ed is now a highly regulated industry, and it's harder and harder to comply with the matrix of laws at the state and federal level.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Jones, president at South Arkansas Community College in El Dorado. I have down a word, kind of like the alignment, is resources. Resources from the state funding, resources as far as faculty and staff, resources as in facilities and equipment and supplies for our classes. It could go on and on and on. Resources for our students as far as financial aid. That's that one word that kind of encompasses everything. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Belinda Aram. I'm the CFO at South Arkansas Community College, and I believe one of the biggest things that's impacting us nationwide is the continued reduced state and federal appropriations.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Boney. I'm Vice President of the University of North Carolina System. And I would say, echoing a lot of people, probably the word money, but in a lot of different directions. I think cost, affordability, value, ROI, all those issues come down to money questions. Is it worth it? How much is it worth?
Hi, I'm Amber Childers, Executive Director of College Advancement at College of the Ouachitas, and I will echo many of you and say that state funding and the economy are critical to impacting our schools.
Hello, Stephen Schoonmaker, President, College of the Ouachitas. I think what I have to offer is a different word but it's about the same thing. It's really about an investment. We are talking about the need for resources, the need for funding, the need for deregulation, the need for getting our folks to work. It is about investing, and I can't think of a better investment than higher education And I think that it is really time to put two-year colleges, community colleges, at the same level of funding of their four-year sisters.
Eric Turner, president of Black River Technical College. Yes, I hear funding and money, and yeah, but I also think that the demographic shifts that we're seeing across our country, I think puts new challenges on how we teach and how we learn and how we resource these things, and then also challenges us in how we, challenges our own paradigms of how we do business.
Stacy Bassett, Government Relations with the College Board. For us, I would say it is very important to try to ensure that students continue to have access to opportunities to earn college credit while in high school, thereby trying to help them to keep down costs and also helping them to stay on target to complete that two-year degree in 2 years as opposed to 3, and the four-year degree as opposed to 6.
Hi, I'm Nicole Monroe. I'm here with Stacy on behalf of the College Board. I would echo her comments. I think the AP courses that we visit about always in the College Board and around arenas are extremely important because, as we've talked about, money being one of the most important issues, AP courses are essentially a way to save money as you enter into the 2-year or 4-year degree programs. Thank you.
I'm Joe Berry with Arkansas State University, BB. I would echo what everybody else has been saying, which is a decrease in state and federal funding, but at the same time an increase in compliance issues, both state, federal, but everybody forgets accreditation matters as well. And every dime that we spend on those compliance issues from whatever master we're serving that day is a dime that we're not spending in the classroom, it's a dime we're not spending on research, and a dime we're not spending on development.
My name's Steve Cole. I'm the chancellor of Cossatot Community College, one of the University of Arkansas colleges. And what I see, one of the largest problems that I see, especially in our area, the sheer number of students that come to our community college that are not ready for college work. We didn't create the remedial student. And yet we are under much pressure to increase our graduation rates. It's very difficult to have students that are already somewhat college ready. And I think that's a huge problem for us.
I'm Shane Broadway, Director of the Arkansas Department of Higher Education. And again, I would echo what has been said by many of my colleagues here from across the state. One thing I would mention is communication. Communicating early and often to parents and students about careers and opportunities at an earlier age, to help them understand what opportunities are going to be there for little Johnny and little Susie when they get out of high school. The other one is, obviously, all of these things present challenges, but certainly, how do we retain and graduate these students once we get them there?
Thank you. I'm Jane English, and I'm a senator with the state of Arkansas, and I'm here to listen and learn.
I'm Eugene McKay, Chancellor at ASU-BB, and my first 10 choices have already been selected. But one thing that I haven't heard is that our students come not only underprepared for college, but they come from families and cultures that do not value education.
Hello, I'm Linda Berkner. I'm from the University of Arkansas Community College at Morrilton. And one of our big challenges is how society views higher education and where we go in the future. If society thinks we're too expensive, where does that put us?
Society thinks you're too expensive. That one's a given, so let's go over here to Beth.
Good afternoon, Beth Brindley, Commissioner of the Kentucky Department of Workforce Investment. And the words I would share are sectors and career pathways.
Yay, a demand-side answer.
Brian Darmody, Associate Vice President for Corporate and Foundation Relations at the University of Maryland. Just one issue that I've been thinking about is a looming reluctance to retire. Will there be room for new faculty? And with the end of mandatory retirement, lifetime tenure, but also defined contribution plans. Used to be able to retire, know what you're going to get. I'm in TIAA craft, so I'm going to have to work until I'm 86. If the stock market goes down, another 10 points. So,
good news, life expectancy is only 82, so, you know.
Good afternoon.
Sandra Massey, ASU Newport. I think that we're missing those critical strategic conversations in our communities that not only talk about career pathways that are truly aligned, but also where are we losing our students along the way? And as a community, what are those resources we can put in place to keep people on that pathway?
I'm Charlie Appleby with ASU Newport, and like Dr. McKay, my first 10 answers have already been issued, but I would say our ability in terms of speed to anticipate and respond to needs in our regions.
I'm Gary Green. I'm president at Forsyth Technical Community College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And my word would be technology. There's really two dimensions, at least two dimensions to that. One is the rapidly changing technology that is now required for our curricula if we're going to prepare the workforce that employers need in our communities and our regions. The second dimension of that is the rapidly changing learning technologies that are transforming how we deliver education today across all sectors. We cannot change and move fast enough with technology to keep up. Thanks.
Hi, I am Tom Burnett. I manage strategic initiatives for Apple. Thank you for what you just said. That was one of my things, but the first one that popped into my mind, yeah, exactly. The first one that popped into my mind is just the congruence from the bridge from K-12 education to higher education. It's been echoed a couple of times.
Sorry, John.
I'm John Allen. I am retired. I highly recommend it. Digital learning.
Robert Evans, Arkansas State University System. The lack of state and federal funding.
Hi, Lindsay Midkiff from East Arkansas Community College. I would say change in economy, change in funding, workforce as well.
Chris Hegel, just spell it Eagle. I would say the long-term effects that high interest rates, student loan high interest rates have on home ownership and long-term wealth.
Rosemary Owens, Middle Tennessee State University. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, there's still a challenge with racial minorities, adult single parents, access and preparation.
Michael Moore, University of Arkansas System Vice President for Academic Affairs. In addition to many of the other comments, I would add the challenge outside of venues like this to continue the conversation, particularly with policymakers, to recognize things like complexity in the nuances and the different ecosystems that higher ed serves. There tends to be monolithic proposals put forward to solve the problem, and there's not a problem. There are multiple solutions to multiple problems.
I'm Jimmy Yiser. I'm the Provost and Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs with the University of Arkansas at Monticello. To me, one of the issues that comes to my mind is just the changing profile of the student that we are expected to educate, to graduate, to retain. Our willingness as institutions and as faculties to meet that change, and then the technology and all the tools that we're going to need in order to stay, let's just say, up or maybe hopefully ahead of public education here in the state of Arkansas. So to me, that's a big area.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Moray. I'm Secretary of Economic Development for the state of Louisiana. It's so good to see so many of my old friends here today, Walter. Two key words for me are market responsiveness.
And Stephen, we'll come back to that one too, as you might imagine.
Hi, I'm Rod Sweetman with the Arkansas Department of Higher Education and Arkansas Economic Development Commission. And I would say heading off the student loan debt crisis and also global competitiveness.
Hi, my name is Joel Gordon. I'm the director for the Launchpad in the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub. The two words that I would, or the two phrases that I would give you are hands-on and experiential education.
Ricky Tompkins, Vice President for Learning at Northwest Arkansas Community College in Bentonville. And for me, I think it's just the continued and growing need to continue to emphasize student success, but without forgetting that access to education is still the primary way for people to get out of poverty. So we can't forget access even when we're looking at student success.
Thank you all very much. That's the only time we're going around the room today. The rest of the time is y'all raise your hand and get a microphone and keep talking. So let me just ask a question of the group, since by my count, slightly over 40% of you talked about money. How many of you actually think that there's going to be more money? Just raise your hand if you do. Okay, so if there's not going to be more money and your top issue is money, what does that mean for higher education? And that's an open question. Raise your hand if you'd like to start a discussion on that. What does it mean? Yeah. Here, I'll grab Walter over here for you.
I'm going to go back, Ted, to your earlier comments about having to reimagine what we're doing in higher education. I think it's going to force all of us to reprioritize what we do. Some would argue that while we don't have enough money, and I like to call it more mission, fewer resources, we're all going to be in a position where we're going to have to really prioritize those things that are important to us and make some tough decisions. Someone said crucial conversations, but there's going to have to be a lot more collaboration. There are a lot of ways to get to that.
How do we deal with it? I'll let you run around.
So, certainly for research universities, we get a small amount of our money from the state, 20, 25%. Yet too often the state treats like we're 100% state funded. So I think some comments came up here as how is higher ed different than other state agencies, giving more flexibility and reducing some of the time. I mean, a principal investigator now spends 46% of their time, not on doing research, but on compliance issues, either before or after, and a lot of that's imposed by the federal government, not states, but increasingly, and there's differences of how states treat research contracts, et cetera. So there needs to be better alignment. Let us have more flexibility, and maybe we can do better with fewer resources.
Okay. Who else? There's one right behind you.
I think somebody mentioned a while ago communication, and I got to thinking about this. It's the money, yes, hurts, but obviously, I say obvious, we do a good job in education. But obviously we do a terrible, terrible job of communicating exactly what we do. We get continuous requests for information from all over the state in different areas. So we must not be doing a very good job of telling the story. And that's probably one reason why we're not valued like we should in the development of workforce or development of general education and transfer, because we're not telling a good enough story to let people know we know what we do, but we don't do a good job of communicating and telling that story, which may be what we need for funding. And these requests do not happen in times where there is a building and budding economy. It's only whenever the funding goes down. I'm only speaking from my time in Oklahoma, Louisiana, and now Arkansas. It's the same cycle up and down.
What do you do?
We educate anybody and everybody who comes to it. We take people and we lift them up. I think what they said in Louisiana is that a rising tide lifts all boats. We can change people's lives. We can help replace the graying of America. We can do anything just about that we're asked to do if we have the resources to do them with. And I believe Dr. Bumpus once said that, I heard him speak, and he said that doing more with less is not a good formula for the future.
Okay. So, all the way around. See, you have the hard part. If they hadn't put a little fence for me up here, I'd have helped you, but yeah.
Well, I think we are already, but I think we have to be even more creative and entrepreneurial and find people with like minds and like needs to bring together. Many of us in the community college area are partnering with industries, and if they have the need for those training and workforce development, many times they will help provide resources in one way or another to meet their needs. So we work together for that. So entrepreneurial.
Hi. A couple of years ago, a colleague of mine sent me an article that was written by a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin, and it was entitled, "If Only We Told Our Story Better." And it was specifically speaking about government relations efforts, which is the area that I work in. And what it talked about was that oftentimes in higher education, the first thing that legislators hear from us is that we need more money. And it's consistent with what we've heard here today. And the thrust of the article was that if institutions of higher education would become more centered on how we can help meet the needs that are pressing in our state, and be more focused as opposed to being so me-focused or centric, if you will, that those conversations about funding would naturally flow if there was a real true understanding that higher education gets it. And oftentimes I think we don't, or we don't communicate what it is that we're doing well. And there are a lot of things we're doing well, but there are also areas that we could certainly improve.
As y'all might imagine, as we've done this around the country, who's in the room amazingly changes the conversation. So if we went to Jay's membership at the Mississippi Manufacturers and we asked them, you know, what's different about higher ed today, and I'll ask him this when he gets up on the panel in a little while, but I mean, we would hear all sorts of stuff about return on investment and the need for you to lower cost and the need for you to meet market demands and all of that kind of stuff. We wouldn't hear anything about you need more money. And so this is a fundamental schism that's taking place in the marketplace right now. Is, you know, and y'all, by the way, you sound exactly like, by the way, your overregulation, too complex, that would be exactly what his membership would talk about. You sound just like a group of manufacturers. If they could just get all that stuff out of our way, then we could be more efficient with what we do, right? Absolutely true. Let's go to the back over here.
I think there's an equation that we've left out of that. We see a lot from the academic side, from the industry side. I deal a lot with students, and I'd challenge anyone who's here to sort of disguise yourself one day, walk into a classroom, take over as a substitute teacher, or have an opportunity to talk to kids today. And I think an honest conversation is that 99.9% of the kids that you talk to today, if you ask them, are you going to go to college, the answer they're all automatically going to give you is absolutely. Now, they don't mean that. And that's something I've learned as an informal educator. I've learned that that's the answer they've been trained to give. They're gonna tell you that. But I have a role where I get to talk to kids honestly a lot. They trust me. And the conversation that I hear a lot from them is that college is elite. There's no jobs out there for me. And that's the story we need to change. That's the mindset we need to change. So how do we get these kids excited about the idea of going into college, and not just the broad answer of absolutely I'm going to college, and get them to be prideful about the fact that they've actually earned that degree?
Stephen, I'm going to put you on the spot. You said market response. So could you just give me 3 or 4 sentences for this group of what you meant by higher education responding to the market demands?
Well, I think increasingly there are some fields in the U.S. that have tremendous growth potential if we can produce enough talent to fill all the potentially available jobs in those fields. A good example in Louisiana is that we have today just thousands and thousands and thousands of announced positions in software development and in engineering. These both happen to be fields where there's a global shortage of talent right now. And so one of the things that we've been working on is trying to better connect business and industry with our universities, and starting this year actually providing funding specifically for, at least supplemental funding, specifically for those high growth fields that are associated with economic driver companies in our state. That's one example.
Yep. How does higher ed respond to markets? What are your markets? Who are the customer? Who drives what you do? At Apple, my guess is that the customer drives a lot of it. I know y'all are famous for making me the customer want your stuff. I got that, but still, I mean, who are the customers here?
Well, it strikes me that we're really schizophrenic about that.
Yes, you are.
That on one hand, our customers are the students that we serve, and that's a very genuine proposition that we're there to serve students and prepare them. And I'm speaking from maybe a community college perspective, but I think it holds true. We're there to prepare them for the workforce, whether it's at certificate, associate degree, baccalaureate degree, or professional program. We're there to prepare them for the economic realities of their life. We're also there to prepare to serve our employers in the area, the region, the nation, depending on the scope and scale of our operation. And I think we tend to swing from one of those constituencies to the others continually when they have sometimes varying needs.
Gary, let me keep you up for a minute. So I agree with you completely. And then the next question is, so where does the funding come from and how does that connect to the customer?
Well, I think I'll go back to your comments a while ago. If you talk to colleges and universities, for example, you'll find that regulatory issues is huge, and we'll be saying the same thing as private sector employers. We have commonalities with our employers, but then you will also get divergence in what you will hear between universities and colleges around the placement of their students and what's required in the curriculum and what we should be teaching and what employers then will oftentimes be telling us. One of the things that we find is that nothing now gets done alone. The strategic partnerships are absolutely crucial to addressing that employer side of the issue. And I think that's got to be a part of our solution, if you will, for the resource issue. I don't think anyone sees, well, there wasn't a single hand go up as far as state
resources, yeah.
And that's public funding in general, state, federal, local. We're not going to see that. And so it's the strategic partnerships. We've got to address the value proposition that's important to those individuals that can help us with resources. Those who have resources and need us have to understand that they have to invest if we can provide the ROI.
Customers. So if you've got a group of students who are customers, they have a specific desire for outcome. If you have a group of employers for customers, they have a specific desire. If you have elected officials, what do elected officials want from higher ed? Somebody help me. What is it that, since we all talked about wanting, a bunch of us talked about wanting more resources from elected officials, what is the return on investment that they want to see? Why would they give more money? Somebody raise your hand. Help me. Let's kick that one around for a few minutes. What do they want?
Well, citizens that are working and paying taxes.
That'd be good. Yep.
What I tend to hear, they want a qualified workforce.
Yep.
To make them more competitive, either domestically or internationally.
Okay. So they want people working and they want a workforce that can go to work. You're about to answer the other question, right? No, go ahead.
No, I don't. They want a growing economy.
Okay.
Which is broader than just the workforce question, so, in my opinion.
Broaden it for me.
Results of research, things that can be monetized, things that can be produced and used by society, by the broader customer base.
One of the things that we've been working on at Southern Governors Association, information is an interesting thing. We all talked about it's hard to get your information out. It's hard to get any information out. Some of you were with me this morning at a higher ed forum, and you throw out information that's relatively easy to get, and if it hasn't been packaged the right way or you didn't look for it, you sort of don't know. At SGA, we've been putting together, as part of Governor Beebe's agenda this year, research, R&D, because for higher ed, that's a big deal for economic development, how it impacts. And Diane, can you just pop up for a minute? Went live this week, a couple days ago, brand new stuff. Yesterday. But what we've tried to do is on the SGA website is start collecting everything. If you just bop through it, just sort of make everybody dizzy for a minute, but this is R&D intensity and it's spending, I can see that. We tried to collect every piece that we could on R&D and spending and comparative data, every state in the country, every piece of data point we could find. So that you can look and see, how does Arkansas do against North Carolina? What are the key areas that you're funding? This is all available, simple, free, anybody, anything data. So this is federal R&D. Here's the state comparisons by type. Here's the, the number percentage by everybody. Here's academic R&D expenditures. There's also private R&D expenditures, federal government, a little bit of everything, all in one place to try to drive policy. You can sort this any way you want. It's completely, it's actually one of the better friendly things I've seen. But this is patent activity. So that when people say, people come in, they say, well, I didn't know. You say, well, okay, now it's easy. Go find out. Go ask your questions. Try to figure that out. When we talk about trying to respond to this, it's a trap. Just, I'm not going to be too preachy up here, but if you tell people that you're the economic engine and you provide the workers, then the next question is, show me, measure it, give me the numbers. How many engineers did you graduate? How many got a job? What kind of job did they get? How many stayed in Louisiana? Somebody's going to ask that question, right? So if you're trying to meet that economic development thing, then all of a sudden, internal to your organizations, there are different questions you ask. If that's the customer, if the customer is to respond to the economy, but my bet is y'all have other customers in this room, that higher ed serves other purposes, at least in some of your minds, right? What else does higher ed serve? Yeah. Yeah, you got to do this, sorry. Got to have a mic.
This is not my field, but I think this is exactly where it gets confusing as you start to differentiate what all is out there in higher ed. Now, I've watched what's been going on in our state, and I live this R&D stuff all the time, trying to make the case that we're going to invest in R&D and build up capability because it's going to generate the ideas to become the next Google, and they're going to be in our state. Right. That's a long, long path for an awful lot of us in this region. On the other hand, I watch the interest in the manufacturing resurgence, and all of our states are interested in rebuilding that industry. And that seems to be a very, very strong conversation in terms of who's talking to the policymakers and the budget writers about what's needed. And so we're seeing a resurgence of investment in technical and community colleges, particularly the technical college system in our state, because they're turning out the people that industry wants, and industry is down there telling the state, here's what you need to do if you want our business. There are not a lot of people in our state going into the Capitol saying, I need more R&D. And I think that's more of a regional issue for us in the Southeast, with the the exception of maybe in North Carolina, and if we stretch up to Brian's neck of the woods in Maryland. But for most of us, we're not R&D intensive. We don't have that industry saying we need more PhDs at our PhD granting institutions. Right. We need more workers at the technical system. And I think this is where the whole conversations it just gets very unclear, because higher ed is a bundle of a lot of different things addressing a lot of different customers. But at the end of the day, it comes down to which customer is most vocal with budget writers.
So what else do elected officials value? What else do they want from you? I mean, this is the whole issue, right? How do you deliver what someone wants so you can get more funding for it? Jay?
Well, on the other side of what I do is work with elected officials all the time on a lot of issues, and what we're starting to see is more emphasis on performance metrics. And the side of performance metrics are not just graduation rates, for example, but it's more, what are you graduating and what are they capable of doing? And so when you look on the end user, so to speak, which is many cases the private sector who hires the graduates, do you have to retrain them all over again? Are their skills capable of doing what I need them to do? Have we just wasted a lot of time and resources because I have to start all over again to really get them capable of doing what I need to do? So the whole issue of performance metrics are going to go beyond the classroom and into the workplace. And I think you're going to start seeing that in more and more areas. We just, for example, in our state, we're going to be moving into performance budgeting. And it scares people when you move into that area. How am I going to be rated? What am I going to be rated on? But the issue for legislators, because they hear from their business community, is I'm not getting what I need. So how do we get to that point?
Somebody in the education community, how do you get there? I mean, how do you know? And I push back on. I ask employers what the skills they're going to need. How many people 5 years from now? They have a hard time telling me. They don't know 5 years from now. I ask community colleges what kind of lead time they need. As much as they can get, right? And that's hard. So there is a pushback here. I want to keep pushing this because I want to see if I can get to a point where I can get y'all into this question. But so if you're selling, most of you, educational services to a customer that's a student, then if you can make what that student gets from his educational or her educational experience worth what they pay, why not just charge them what it cost you? I mean, why not just full cost coverage for students? Don't need any public money. Now, what does the public sector get for their money? Is it that they get a trained workforce that they wouldn't get otherwise? So they're in effect subsidizing worker training? Is that what higher education was about? I'll push you a little bit further there. I mean, where's the area where higher education's intrinsic values are past that of worker skill training? Y'all believe that? I know. I've seen the studies on how higher ed thinks about this. How do you sell that? Isn't that part of what you're selling? All right. Technology, Gary brought up, is changing everything about y'all's lives and about student demands. How many of you think you're ahead of the curve on technological change at your colleges or universities? Not a soul? Okay, how many of you are scrambling mightily and at least can see where you're supposed to get to? All right, good, good. So what's changing? What's the customer expect from a technological standpoint? Tell me. It's okay, we'll let them sit for a minute. They'll jump up. What does the student or the business want?
Well, the student wants learning that's infused with technology, and the employer wants to ensure that we are training our students on the latest technology and not archaic die casting machines like I have.
So how does the latest technology infused education, what does that do to your institutions? What changes? What's different? Jump in if you want.
Don't give me a mic because I'll never shut up. I think it changes how we deliver education.
Okay.
We are no longer, as an academic faculty member in the classroom, the imparter of knowledge. Our students can go and find that knowledge. We are having to look at it differently, and we are the facilitators of learning. And that is a very difficult hurdle to get in the mindset of higher ed.
You are no longer the imparters of knowledge, but you're the facilitator of learning. How many people agree with the statement? How many people disagree with the statement? Now, so put your faculty hat on for just a second. How many of you think that if you put that on a big sign, big billboard up in front of your university, you are no longer the imparters of knowledge, you are the facilitators of learning, that you'd last the day? What does that mean? I mean, honestly, I think you're absolutely correct, at least, but what does that mean to the structure of higher ed? This is tough, right? This is hard. Yeah, Beth?
I think it means project-based learning. I believe that it's applied learning. I believe it's teacher immersion into the workforce so they can contextualize the concepts that are being taught, a whole host of strategies. But much more hands-on, much more experiential learning, more project-based learning.
If you look at the book that you picked up outside, two of the lessons from Innovation U are more workforce entrepreneurial connections, more international learning. Yeah. Somebody over here. There you go. And then we'll go back to the back. Yep. Now, here first. And then
I think imparters of knowledge are much more expensive than facilitators, and I think that's what we're going to start to see. It'll take a long time for it to work through the system, but that's maybe one of the ways that we get the cost down.
You think the cost is going to come down?
Well, if that's the direction we're moving, and then I also think that there's less need for bricks and mortar.
Okay. We'll go back. Gentleman right back there. Then we'll come over here.
Well, while I certainly agree with Dr. Elliott's excellent comment and giving us a great tagline, I think that we need to truly dive deeper into what we mean by facilitators of learning, because we are also trying to engage our students in a learning process that's lifelong. And that isn't just saying, good job, I'm facilitating you by being a cheerleader. You are truly coaching, in the fullest sense of the word, the learning process. You need, as an educator, to understand how people learn. The need for people to understand the neuroscience of learning has never been greater. And we are on a faster and faster pace of understanding the evolution of what is needed to be learned, what skills are needed, what attitudes are needed. The soft skills of yesterday are the hard skills of today to the employers I talk to. They really need people to know how to learn, because they already know they don't know what's coming. They just need people who can learn. So when we say that we're not imparting knowledge, what we mean is we certainly impart a lot of knowledge, but the way we do it has to be more engaging, because we have to empower the student when they leave us to continue to learn, because that is what's needed, not just today, but tomorrow.
Let's see. If you'll grab there, I'll go over here.
I think the comment about the imparters and facilitators of knowledge it is interesting, in that it strikes me is that our challenge is that we now have to have both. Where traditionally it was the faculty member who was the subject matter expert and that was the expert on delivery. That's no longer the case. We have to have expertise, we have to have subject matter expertise that goes very deep in subject matter. But we cannot expect those subject matter experts now to have all of the facilitation skills that are involved around technology-infused instructional design. And so we have to have both of that. So it doesn't reduce cost. Down the road it may at some point, but it's actually, I think, driving up cost right now. And so it's not about, whether it's imparter or facilitator. We have to have both, but it has to be almost a different kind of environment where the actual subject matter and the designer are two different functions that have to come together in different individuals.
Okay. Over here.
Well, I would say that this conversation brings me back to one of the expectations of customers that we didn't mention, and that's efficiency. And legislators want to see efficiency, and when you talk about bricks and mortar, legislators have a hard time understanding, well, if we're going to digital learning platforms and we're moving that direction, why do you have to keep so many buildings? Why do you have to build new buildings? So there's kind of mixed messages when these budget proposals come to legislative committees.
Not easy, right? Nobody thought it was. When Apple wants to please its customers, what do? As a customer, a heavy user customer, I want a really good answer.
So the quick one, a quick story Dan Pink likes to tell is that no one back in 2001 said, I really need an iPod. that was a transformational innovation. And so to your earlier comment, we don't spend a lot of time doing focus group work. We're trying to think out beyond that, not even outside the box. We don't see a box.
You don't ask customers what they want. You figure out where the technology is going and that customers would respond to.
Yes.
Yeah. So where's the student of 2025 going to be? Thank you. Perfect answer. What's the student going to want? If it's the student, we can figure out what business wants, right? They want, and somebody said it perfectly, a gentleman in the back here, they want intellectual agility. They want people who can learn and relearn and motivated to do so all the time. That's what they want more than anything else. And, you know, they want energy and honesty and all those things, and they want communication, problem solving, and all those. We know that. We know what they want. How are they going to want it from their higher ed in 15 years, 20 years? And is there anybody in the room who's thinking that far out about how they design their programs? Yeah, jump in. We'll get you a mic of your own. It'll be okay. Right here. Yeah.
Well, I think that they don't want the traditional model. They don't want the semester and the summer schedule. They want a relationship with us, with their college or university that they have with their Xbox or their Minecraft game, or I have 4 sons, so obviously
got it.
I'm up
World
on
War.
all
I
this.
got it.
But they want a relationship with us like we have with people we do business with, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, online, anytime.
I was telling Gary earlier that the community college next door to him, I helped them with their strategic plan, and the one that scared them to death, but they put in their strategy, is deliver services 24/7, 364. I think 364 is what they said. That they've got to be able to deliver classes to anyone at any time the way they want it. Wow. I remember typing Cobalt cards at 2 in the morning in Carolina at the in the basement of the Bath building. I mean, because that's when undergrads could get the computer time, right? So that's a real change.
I think you really nailed it with that statement. You know, there's a lot more of this diagnosis of ADD, ADHD, and I would actually argue that that's just the world they live in now. And I look around the room right now and I see how many people are actually connected to that technology that they have sitting in front of them, and our kids are twice that connected. So one of the first questions I have is how many educational bodies in this room allow smartphones in the classroom? Right. And I think right off the bat, one of the lessons that we end up teaching kids is that having that thing is bad, and what we're doing is encouraging them to use it as a social media outlet and not a tool.
Yep. So somebody imagine a future for me. What's it going to look like 20 years from now? Because honestly, we ought to be preparing for it now if it's 20 years.
One of my favorite movies is The Matrix. I want education in the future to be that. I want to fly a helicopter, just plug it in. I really do think that we will have the opportunity as educators to really be brokers of education, to allow that diversity of exchange between the students and the college campus, the education that they get, that they need. I think my colleague next to me just said it's going to be more a la carte. I mean, it's going to be, I need this skill, I need this knowledge for this purpose. And I think that we'll have employers also looking to us and say, we have a transformation in our field, we need this skill to be revamped, and we need to be nimble, and we need to be responsive to those changing demands.
How many people think there will be a BA degree in 25 years? I do. How many think there'll be a whole bunch of things that don't actually have letters beside them currently, right? Quantifiable, stackable credentials that employers stamp If you know, and I think a whole bunch of them are going to be game platforms. You learn, click. Let's go over here, and then we'll come back up. Yeah.
I think it's going to be a ridiculously fragmented market, and it's already getting there. But there are going to be people who specialize just in certificates. I think there are those that are going to specialize just in remediation. There's going to be 2-year tech, 4-year polytech, bachelor's 3 years, bachelor's 4 years, bachelor's in high return areas. There are going to be master's, PhDs, professional programs, and then you subdivide all those into ones for people of a certain age and others of a certain age at a certain time, different delivery platforms. And the danger for public institutions is that all the profitable venues get plucked off by entrepreneurial people, and the publics are left with those least profitable things trying to make a case for them when most of the market has gone somewhere else.
I got asked this morning, what did I think about the private educational institutions that were siphoning off so much stuff, and they all were terrible, but what did I think about them? And so my answer was that I thought that y'all would fight back. That once you saw that there was a market demand for something, private people, the private universities didn't, a whole bunch of people didn't go start going to southern New Hampshire because they liked New Hampshire. They went because they were offering something that somebody wanted for a price somebody wanted. And my bet is that y'all could replicate that for a better price. That's just my bet. And you will at some point, I think. The market will. I agree completely with you, Leslie. The market's going to fragment, and you're going to have a bunch of other things that become part of it. So what do you tell legislators? How do you explain this complexity? How do you explain this to somebody who, by the way, you only have 12 seconds to do it, so go ahead. And
I don't know about explaining it to our legislators, but sorry, Senator. I used to be one, so
well,
no one could explain it to me. Actually, they could. They explained it very well, and we tried our best to do what we could do. But this whole conversation, and we are faced with generations upon generations of millennials that are starting to come to our schools, and we have to do different things. But I want to go back to the money, because I still believe that while the economies are changing and there are jobs in 20 years that we don't even know they exist yet, but I still think we still have to be the builder of things. You can't build a virtual pipeline. That doesn't happen. You might train virtually somewhat, but you still have to have someone doing the work, the hands-on work. So when it comes and we're called upon to train those people, which I think there will always be a need for, those programs are extremely capital intensive, and they do require funding beyond normal measures just to start those programs. If you don't, someone else will. And I think we all just try to be competitive, and I think that's where the funding problems start to really get caked up. Is we know those programs will exist. They always will exist. They're just very expensive to start and maintain.
So should everybody go to college, to higher ed? Why?
This was something I was going to say a minute ago about should everybody go, and I sit around and wonder sometimes what's going to change when a lot of us are gone, because I do think, and somebody talked about this.
The world
in the
won't
one
be as
word,
good a place.
Well,
surely,
true, but the cultural or I'm looking at my own situation right now with a high school senior, and I've got a really great kid, and he wants to design yachts. And we've looked at some 4-year schools, and we looked at a couple of 2-year technical programs. Mm-hmm. And I'm really torn, because my old school self is saying, I want my son to have a 4-year college degree. My practical side is saying, bang for the buck? I don't know. He's going to be successful, I think, no matter what. But what's going to get him doing what he wants to do? I wonder, how much of what's going on right now is just we're torn between these two different cultural groups that we've got of kind of old school, everybody's got to have that 4-year college degree, and there's a whole new world coming in terms of how kids are going to get into the workforce.
How many people in the room wanted their children to go to 4-year colleges? Why? Why did you want them to go? The answer up here was, it used to be the best way to to get advanced, to get a better job? Why do you want to go to four-year college? Why do you want your kids to go?
In my opinion, we wanted our kids, 4 kids, to go to a 4-year school because research still suggests that the pathway to greater income over a lifetime is with a baccalaureate degree. Now, having said that, 2 of our kids went to community college, graduated, and then transferred. I think the key piece here is not only the access piece, but the student success piece. Not every student's ready to go away and be in a class of 400 of their new best friends. Yep. So for many kids, it's not about aptitude as much as it is about maturity. And we've got to be in a position, what's best for the kid, you know.
Why else? Why did you want your kids to go to 4-year college? You want them to get ahead. You thought it was the best way to get a better job. Is that right? So some percent of jobs need a 4-year degree. The vast majority don't. So if we send everybody, then we are oversupplied by about 3 to 1. And what happens to the wages of 4-year college degrees? And then that doesn't work anymore. But it's our kids, so this is my real estate, everybody can't build a new office building, but the one I build will be the one that gets leased. Therefore, it's okay. All right.
Well, I think part of it's social because most of us went to 4-year schools, so we impart that onto our children. And a lot of kids, I know my son graduated computer science, but he didn't know when he started that that's what he wanted to do. And so, ultimately, and he had no trouble getting a job. And to the other point, unemployment rates, even though, again, you can just, the more education you have, the lower your unemployment rate is, even if you're, not in maybe a technical field. So I think all of those factors suggest that education is still a very good return on investment.
Let's see. Go ahead. Yeah.
Ted, if I could just add one other comment. Our son, Brian, and it makes me think about, there are a lot of Brians around the world. It was after Brian had spent 9 years pursuing a baccalaureate degree that my wife sat down with him and said, Brian, we probably need to kind of piece this together. And we started using a technical term around our house called cobbling together enough credits. But we found that Brian had, I think it was 6 transcripts, 2 community colleges, a couple of universities, but he's not unlike most kids around the country today. Most folks are graduating and they have 3 or 4 different transcripts. When many of us went to school, you had 1 transcript for your undergrad. And I think you're finding now lots of folks are, going in and out of a lot of different colleges, and that's what the norm is today, more than the exception.
You made me feel better about our 7-year sojourn. So
well, he took a victory lap after every good semester.
That's good. There's one in the back. And somebody over here. Yeah. Okay.
Well, one of the reasons I wanted my children to go and get a 4-year degree was because of all of what I consider to be the misinformation that's floating around out there, clouding up what the real issues and the real answers are. So I felt that one of the best ways for them to be able to deal with this was to be able to think critically. I think they need to be able to analyze problems, and they need to be able to deal with problem resolution. In my mind, the 4-year degree is the best way to do that.
Liberal arts, right? I said this morning, all these things sound like a philosophy degree to me, and I think that we ought to get everybody an undergraduate philosophy degree by 12th grade. What do you think? Critical thinking, communication, all that good stuff. Senator.
Actually, I wanted my kids to be happy with what they chose to do for the life, and obviously at 18 or even younger, they don't know. So I have 1 daughter who went to college, had 1 son who dropped out of high school because it wasn't for him. Smart kid. Ended up going to a VOTEC, went off to work offshore as soon as he was 18. He now does things with the energy industry for Caterpillar and makes a very good living, but he never fit into the box. And I think sometimes it's, as all of us sit in this room, we'd like to think about college as the ultimate, but it isn't for everybody. And I personally, as I said, my daughter is a college graduate. She does great, but that was her bent. It was not my son's bent.
I agree with you. I had the sign that said happy and self-sufficient. Those were the 2 things I wanted for my kids. So.
That's exactly right.
That's right. So higher ed's in transition, right? Jump in there. Why did you want? You're on.
All right, just along the same line was, we sat down with our kids and talked about their career. And we asked them what they wanted to be and what they were interested in. And then we talked about what that degree would be and researched it. So it wasn't necessarily that we expected them to earn a bachelor's. In fact, they're both doctorate prepared physical therapists. So they went on, but that was part of the discussion was, what do you want to be? What is the career you want to pursue? And then we talked about what it would take to get there. And for them to realize the length of time and that they would have to invest and the money that we would have to help them with. And so I think that's part of the discussion. We need to turn things around and not talk about what the degree level it is, but what career do they want to pursue?
Great transition. One of the things when we go out in a room full of businesses and ask these questions, we hear pretty routinely that even college grads don't have the skills that businesses are looking for. You hear that all the time. We just can't find people with the skills that we want. Okay, what's wrong here? I mean, y'all generally know what those skills are. I mean, almost every list looks alike, and y'all have named most of them today. It's critical thinking and communication and problem solving and teamwork and all those things. How do we deal with that? Because if businesses is getting what they want, then this is an easier communication sell than if a legislator or parent is hearing every day, well, those graduates, they just don't have the skills. What's wrong here? What needs to happen? What needs to be different? Yeah. I'm the only one in the middle.
Well, Ted, I don't know if this answers your question, but it's interesting we haven't touched on this subject, but we are still caught in the mindset that we are here, that we exist to train or educate a student for a job. But we also know that people today don't stay in the same job. Unlike my grandparents who worked for the same company forever. And so I don't know that we've had enough conversations about that, and that yes, the students may be graduating today with a certificate or a technical degree in welding, but the chances that individual is still going to be a line welder 10 years from now may not be probable. So what are we doing beyond that?
That's a good question. I mean, 4.4 years is the average time Americans spend at a job now. So, absolute good point. I mean, if we train them exactly and they switch, then the good news is they're back at community college re-signed up, right? But,
So one strategy at Maryland we've been doing is for residential colleges. So if you think about it, we started a dormitory for entrepreneurial students. So it wasn't just part of the classroom experience, but it was part of their entire time in the dorm. We just set up, with Northrop Grumman's help, we set up a dormitory for cybersecurity students called ACES, Advanced Cybersecurity Experience for Students. So these are not degree programs, but it's getting students in broad areas, not just from engineering, but from philosophy and public policy and all throwing them together. And so taking advantage of those capital resources that we were talking about, that kind of experience you're only going to get, living on a campus.
By the way, has anybody here not learned something in the last month? How'd you learn? Any of you take a class? Any of you enrolled in the last month? A couple. But how'd the rest of you learn something? Internet. How else? Books. What else? Conversation, talking with others. How else do you learn? That's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about learning. And yet we learn all the time. I tell the story that in North Carolina I got hired. The legislature passed a law that all the workforce programs, all 23 of them, had to use a common set of metrics. They didn't ask any questions. They just said, you got to use all common metrics. And they put the 23 organizations in a room, and my job was to come up with common metrics for them. And of course, they all have mandated different metrics by their federal government funders. And so we started we had this discussion. One of the biggest arguments we had, and it was a multi-hour argument, was when did someone complete community college if they weren't in a degree program? I mean, if you're a lifelong learner, and community college is supposed to provide access to learning anytime, anywhere, for anybody, then did you ever complete? Were you ever done? Is there anybody here who thinks they can just stop learning now and you're ready for the next 30 years of work? So when we talk a lot about education, we tend to talk about it in terms of some set of bricks and mortar that we're inside. But learning and skill acquisition, and I mean, up until, 100 years ago, the number of people who had classroom learning was minuscule. I mean, it was one-on-one, apprenticeship teaching, mostly by parents who taught you how to farm or how to cook or how to do whatever it was. And then we did other things. And so as we talk about higher ed, we're talking about it institutionally, but the broader question in society, most people who they don't care about the individual organizations unless you play football on Saturday or something. I mean, they're thinking about how do my kid or me, if I'm 40 years old and I got to be retrained, how do I access you to get the skills I need to get the jobs I need? Really tough stuff. So now we're going to finish this section of this by asking for advice. So we have governors coming in the next few days. What advice would you give a governor on how to deal with, improve, get the maximum amount out of higher education in their state to meet their desires, priorities, whether that's education, whether that's economic development, whatever they deem it? What advice would you give them? I want a bunch of advice because we're capturing this. And Diane's going to quit writing your name beside the advice. No advice names. What advice to a governor? I'm going to make about 30 of you do this. You might as well get ready. I'll start picking on you if you don't. Okay.
And all 30 of you better do it because I
and
don't want to be alone.
And you're first, so you get to, nobody, yeah.
To remove the barriers and the bureaucracy so we can respond quicker to industry. And by that I mean stop making us look like other state agencies if we're a public school.
Okay. Good advice. Come on, you get to advise the governor today. Tell him what to do. So we go here and then to you.
I think you have to get more of your stakeholders involved at the very beginning of the planning process and not think that you know everything that they're thinking.
You've never done this before, right? So have you never given the governor advice? Go ahead. What does Governor Jindal get advice on?
Well, I think with respect to this specific question, it relates to what a lot of other people are talking about, which is when you look at the issue of money, the issue I don't think is really that legislators aren't prioritizing higher education. I think it's really a crowd out where, the growth of higher education, pension obligations, and some things they really can't control are just constraining how much funding they have available short of increasing tax burdens to fund higher education. So considering that question, how can we sort of maximize that impact? I think every governor ought to be thinking about not just attainment at a high level, but what's the right mix? One of the things that I'm a big believer in, for example, and Walter Bumpus will love this, is that, I think well-designed, well-executed community and technical college programs can generate a tremendous amount of positive impact for considerably less investment. Similarly, I do think that at least at some level, states ought to be thinking about the mix of programs. There's no question that while there are certain things we definitely need in the economy, there are some programs that have a more direct impact on economic growth than others. And I really think we rarely talk about that when we think about higher education policy at the state level.
Good advice. Back there.
I think investing in integrating the resources that we already have. You see a lot of very successful for-profit after-school education programs now. When's the last time anyone in this room went to their local library? A few. So we have these resources that already exist, but we're not utilizing them maybe in the right way. If we concentrated on integrating these systems, museums, libraries, things that already exist into the school system, making them a stronger part of the curriculum, then we have this opportunity to encourage out-of-school learning, and it's still part of the resources that already exist.
By the way, if we expanded that to your local library online, would more people have raised their hand? because I thought about it. I haven't been in the local library in forever, but I download books all the time. So I don't know. Yeah. What else? Advice to governors. There you go, Gary.
I think it's probably similar to integration, but that is alignment to ensure the public investments that are being made in education, K through graduate school, are aligned in such a way that students easily move through a seamless system of higher education and move in and out of that system over a career.
Gary, what percentage of kids who graduate high school should be able to be admitted right away to first-year community college?
Should be able to be admitted?
How many should be ready for first-year community college? They graduated high school.
Well, I think they probably 95% should be ready. That doesn't mean they should all enroll, but they should be ready.
Okay. It's a pet peeve of mine that if you graduate 12th grade, you ought to be ready for 13th. I mean, just pet peeve. I know.
I think every one of these governors that are going to come here have inherited a state. So I think if we asked them if you were going to create a state, would the state look like what you have? And so, I'm from Arkansas. We have, I think, 2 university systems and some independent schools. We have, 22, I forgot the number, 22 two-year schools, 24, I forgot the number, 22 two-year schools. Okay, if Governor Beebe was here and said, you're going to start a state, I'm not convinced he would develop the state as it's defined here. So the reality is the investment of, I won't call it the status quo, but in some cases, these are not education institutions, they're economic development institutions, because they may or may not be the largest employer in the area or whatever. So it's a complicated issue. But my sense is that the states wouldn't look like they look if you started today. And so the reality is, whose ox gets dismantled to get to a more efficient delivery? Because, in my background is corporate life, okay? When you talk about efficiency in terms of delivering your product or service to the market, inheritance of, we used to do this way 20 years ago, it could be a job, it could be a career decision to say, I liked it the way it was 20 years ago. So I think if the challenge was, let's create what we think we could be like and put all the other things aside, I think it would be just an interesting study for them to understand what the delivery mechanism is.
Yeah, everybody is playing in the middle of a chess game when they walk into office. Nobody gets to start with a clean board. They start in the middle of the game. Hopefully the game started a long time ago and finishes a long time from now, but you're absolutely right. You never get a clean slate.
Well, and to piggyback on that, I try to change conversations with policymakers, and so I try to never say higher education, because higher education says bricks and mortar and football teams and all of the things that are associated with it. And so if the conversation changes to your word, the word I'll usually say is higher learning, all of a sudden that creates a better blank landscape to have a good, solid conversation around what does learning mean in the higher realms of ages of students, whatever they are. It lets you have the flexibility to have a much stronger, better conversation. You're going to hit some sacred cows, however, as was just pointed out.
Communication is key. Y'all mentioned that early on. More advice?
I think one thing I would advise any governor, and it goes along with this alignment, K through whatever we want to call it. One of the bigger challenges, we've had all this discussion about learning at the higher ed level. I think there's going to have to be a serious discussion about K-12 and what K-12 or pre-K through 12 is going to look like in 2025. One of our former commissioners said, if we're doing the same thing at the K-12 level in 2025, then we've missed the whole boat. And so I think it's got to be, the discussion has to be simultaneous with all of those levels. It's not just about higher ed and how higher ed reacts or how higher ed looks. It's got to be this seamless discussion, and you're going to have to, especially at the K-12 level, I know it in Arkansas and all these folks do too, they're of a different mindset too. of what their job is as a school or a school superintendent to educate a student, prepare them for college. That's been the mantra for the last several years. And so they're reluctant to partner with colleges because they're funded on a per student basis in most cases, thanks to a lot of lawsuits. So they're reluctant to share that dollar to allow a student to attend a concurrent course or a technical training course at that high school level. A lot of these colleges are having to write it off, scholarship it, whatever, because the district's not going to pay a lot, if anything. And so I think that it has to be a two-way conversation, and K through 12 has to be at that table.
Anything else for governors? Up here. I'll reach over and hand you this.
This is real-world advice that I did give a governor from California. I said a survey of success on the job, the third most important characteristics was having a mentor on the job program. And I said if you could take that model perhaps at different levels of education and build that into the education process, you might have somebody who is more successful in terms of succeeding.
Hey, the only other thing I want to follow up on what Jerry said and what our guest followed up on. The one thing that's tough for people outside of the policymaking world to understand is you come in the middle of the chess game and you don't get to say, okay, time out. Nothing's going to happen until we figure out what we want to do. And so you're trying to make systematic and programmatic changes to a system that is actively in use and can't be completely destroyed, and is evolving on its own time frame at the same time that you're trying to run out in front of it and say, no, turn left up here, turn left, or turn right. And so, you know, it is a constant process. It's not something that any of us are going to show up in Missouri next year and say, well, okay, we got it solved. So thank you, good night.
And just think, if everybody, disagreed, it would make it even harder. So So Diane Duff, the executive director of Southern Growth Policy Board, Southern Governors Association, has been sitting over here typing feverishly, trying to capture notes. Any takeaways of what you've heard?
Well, goodness. I was trying to make sure I didn't garble what you actually said, and I think I did a fairly poor job there. And sorry to you folks whose names I totally bungled. But, my takeaways from what I heard from all of you is telling your story better really is an important aspect of this, not only from the money perspective, but frankly more from the value proposition perspective, which starts changing all the conversations that you have with the industry and with legislators and internally on how you plan for things. That's really important. Collaborating more is going to be really important to maximize your resources, and figuring out how to begin a transition to something that's more consistent with that 24/7, 364 model that you're recognizing that a lot of your students are going to demand will be really important. Those are the three big pickups that I had, and I'm sure that that's just scratching the surface.
Don't you wish you had that FM voice? Man, that's a late night FM voice. I like that. Satchel Paige said it gets credit with a lot of other people of saying that none of us are as smart as all of us. So that's what we try to do with the National Issues Forum. We try to listen to people so that you can have your opinions, and we put them all together. And literally there have been hundreds of these forums. They all go back in, they get shared with legislators all across the country. While that's true that none of us are as smart as all of us, a few of us might be really smart, and we're going to have a panel of those people after our break, and we're going to try to dig a little harder, and I'm going to poke them a little more. And so we're going to take about a 15-minute break with a panelist. If y'all be up here in 15 minutes, you don't need to get set up before that, but we'll take about a 15-minute break, go out, use the facilities, get yourself a cup of coffee, and come back and let's hear what our panelists have to say. But thank you very much for your input.